Hey! Who are you?
Are the Cranky gamers.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another very special edition of the Cranky Gamers UK podcast. This is a bit of a landmark podcast as there is no Toz or Rikki, and the Destiny fanboys have taken over the show, and I'm really excited to say that we've got joined today none other by Dan Maher, aka MrPointyHead, from our favourite TV show, Video Game Nation. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's really nice to be here.
And obviously Steve's here as well. Give a shout out, Steve.
Hello.
Hey, Steve.
Right. So, obviously many of our listeners will know you from way back in the days of Inside Xbox and when we used to send you a message. But I just thought it'd be a bit of fun to get a bit of a profile of your gaming life. So, what got you into gaming? What are some of your favourite games and what systems have you owned?
All right, well, where do I begin? Well, okay, so you can blame my mother for getting me into games. So she wisely decided, or unwisely, depending on how you see it, she decided to get me a Spectrum 48K, which really kind of gives away just how old I am. But it came bundled with a ton of games. The ones I remember most vividly are definitely Horoscope Skiing, Checkered Flag, which is like a really rubbish F1 simulation, and Scrabble, which was just very, very easy to cheat on, because the computer just, the computer would challenge you on words, but you didn't have to prove that they actually existed. You just had to lie and say, yeah, that's a word. Yeah, flubber is definitely a word. Thank you. I'll take those 273 points. Thank you. And so just from there, I was just absolutely enamored. I was an only child. I lived in a fairly kind of run-down part of Wolverhampton on a very busy main road. It really wasn't safe for me to just go outside. I couldn't even step outside my front door without fear of being run over. And so I think my mum saw gaming as a way of sort of encouraging me to stay indoors. And it worked almost too well, because here we are like 30 odd years later, and I'm still staying indoors when I really should be going outside. And so from there, really, I just got into all aspects of gaming culture. So obviously started buying the gaming magazines from Your Sinclair and Sinclair User and Crash, all the way up to, I guess, Edge and that sort of, those mags, and decided that really what I wanted to do was exactly what those guys were doing for a living, which was to write about games. I mean, who wouldn't want to spend their days sort of playing games and writing about games, and that's their career. So I kind of geared my entire sort of education towards achieving that goal. It was very single-minded to the kind of probably to the detriment of all the other subjects I was doing. I was terrible at maths. I was terrible at science. It was like, I don't care. I'm just going to do English and I'm going to be the games writer. So that was kind of what I did. And so, ultimately I went to university, studied, journalism and English literature, started a game section in the university newspaper and magazine, and off the back of that, after graduating, I just casually applied for a job in the Guardian, for a job at PlayStation, writing for PlayStation.com. Unbelievably got it, and then the rest is history. Basically, that's kind of where it all started. In terms of you asked what consoles have I owned over the years? I mean, you name it. I mean, as people who follow me on Twitter, who watch my Video Game Nation or listen to my podcast, Explosive Island Podcast, will know I am traditionally a bit of a Nintendo. I'm a console gamer, first and foremost, and a bit of a Nintendo fanboy with it. So, while I didn't have an NES because we couldn't afford one, I mean, the games on that were £40 and Spectrum games were like £3 to a tenner, so you could see where my mum was, why she was leaning towards the Spectrum.
I can indeed.
Yeah, so, but ultimately I saved up and actually bought myself a Super Nintendo, and my mum was like, oh, if you want to buy Street Fighter 2 for £65, go ahead and be my guest, but you've got to save for it. So that's what I did, because I was like that. So I went from a Super Nintendo, and then, as I started getting part-time jobs, that meant I could then start affording Game Boys, and then I bought a PlayStation, and then after that, I've pretty much owned every major system kind of simultaneously. So right now I'm in possession of a PS4, Xbox One, Wii U, Vita, 3DS, new 3DS, and obviously my mobile phone and the odd bit of PC gaming on Steam when I get the opportunity. So, I'm what I call myself. I call myself like an equal rights gamer. Like I don't really have a platform bias. I'd say my PS4 is my most used console, but that's not to say that I don't get a lot of time out of all of them and enjoy sort of the exclusives that are available across everything.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Does that cover it?
I think it does, yeah. It sounds like your back bedroom's about the same as mine then, in that case, with all of the systems.
Well, I think some of them are definitely up in the attic. My wife was a gamer back in the day as well, so we've got her Mega Drive and original PlayStation. A lot of the handhelds are definitely still about. My N64 still about. My GameCube is still here. I got rid of the Wii because the Wii is backwards compatible. I think the only one I don't have, and is my big regret, is I don't have my Super Nintendo because I had to sell my Super Nintendo to afford my first PlayStation. True story. Yeah.
It's always a shame when you have to sell an old console, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit heartbreaking. Yeah, and I think back on what I had for it, and I was like, oh god. Unfortunately, I recently came into possession of one of those Retron 5 consoles, which has slots for, I think it's like SNES, Mega Drive, NES, and something else. But it's HDMI compatible, so you can basically play all these old games, but all in one console box. So I might start trying to kind of rebuild the collection.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I've always looked at those myself, but I've never really pushed the button on it. But if they're any good, I might get one myself.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about it. I just thought, well, it'd be interesting because a lot of these things as well, I believe, upscale as well, so they do still look very nice and crisp on your TV. I don't think I'm going to be playing old games a lot, but one of the funny things is I've had a daughter recently, and while I'm certainly not going to be like pushy dad saying be a gamer, I would like her to have the opportunity maybe to play some of the older games. I mean, some of the early Nintendo stuff on the Super Nintendo especially is still like timelessly brilliant. You know, you put them on Super Mario World or something, or Yoshi's Island, they're still great. And they're still kind of bright and cartoony and fun to play. And, I think if she ever does show an interest, it'd be great to just get her on some of that old stuff.
Well, if your daughter's anything like my son, whose birthday is today, he absolutely loves the old, Nintendo stuff much more than the new stuff, quite strangely.
Oh, really?
Really. He likes traditional Mario. That's where his love lies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't blame him, though. Just like traditional Mario games. I mean, that's why Super Mario Maker is obviously so brilliant, because it just reveals just how clever those original games were. And then the moment you start trying to build your own levels, you realize like how flexible and diverse even the original Super Mario Brothers was as a game in terms of what you could build out of such a simple premise of just running and jumping.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you've answered my next question, which was going to be, how did you get into gaming? So, that's...
Oh, sorry.
That's alright. It's alright. Don't worry. So you said you worked for the major console manufacturers. So what was that like, and what are your favourite memories from back in those days?
Oh man, well, like when I joined PlayStation in, was it 2001? I was a 21-year-old, wide-eyed, literally first day in London sort of thing. And it was an incredible company to work for. It was kind of as the PlayStation 2 had come out. So Sony were really at the peak of their powers at that point. It was, there was just an excitement, like people wanted to work for Sony, like people who weren't in the games industry wanted to work for Sony, like they were the brand to work for. And that sort of thrill of working at Sony was like palpable around the company. And even though what I was doing was writing for the website and I was surrounded by coders and artists, it was just this huge kind of social group. So you go there and you do your job, but there was a real air of fun around the office. And, you'd finish and everyone would be like, pub. Well, it was called the Midas Touch. We were based in Golden Square in Piccadilly. I was like, pub. And then there'd just be a group of like 15, 20 of me down the pub. And as someone who's new to the city, who's young, and obviously London can be quite a scary place when you're on your own, which I was. They just made me feel so welcome. I made so many great friends there, friends I still see to this day, even though we've gone in different directions and obviously had kids and all that sort. And I don't think I've worked anywhere since that's really had the same vibe. I say I haven't worked anywhere since. I've only had really one other job since that job, so it's not really saying much. But I guess my favorite moments from working at Sony were, well, one, just that just general sense of camaraderie, and there were some massive company trips. I don't know how they got away with it, but they used to do things like they'd send the entire company to Euro Disney, or they'd send the entire company to Malta, and literally just take over an entire hotel. And it was sort of under the guise of it being a bunch of conferences where all the different departments would present to each other. But when that would actually account for maybe 6 hours of a 4-day trip. So you can imagine what the other kind of 3.5 days entailed, and it was just chaos, like messy chaos. And just great fun. And then I think gradually there was a growing feeling of, well, I guess, one, kind of corporate responsibility, and two, money running out. You know, they were developing the PlayStation 3 and they couldn't really afford to be so flagrant with their kind of use of money, or, you know, the big parties started dying down and these big events started dying down, and it became a lot more sort of business focused and serious again, and it kind of lost that vibe, but it's never lost that kind of fundamental sense of everyone who works there just kind of being friends and wanting to socialize outside of it. Like, I do a lot of work for them now through my company, through Explosive Island Productions. And I go back there, and if you see old members of staff, it's like a homecoming. They're just like, "Hey Dan, how's it going?" You know, and you're just like, it's awesome. Some corporations can be very sort of, when you cut ties with a corporation, some people are so ingrained into that corporate culture that they almost feel like you've betrayed them, that you've they drop you dead, yeah. And so, like, in the latter days when I was at Sony, I actually moved jobs and I worked for the international software development team. What that entailed was producing the European versions of games developed in America and Japan. So, say for example, I didn't do Uncharted, but Uncharted is one example. Naughty Dog being a US developer, we'd have someone in the office who was producing the localized European version of that. I worked mainly on like Namco titles. I produced Tekken Dark Resurrection for PS3 and PSP. One of their tennis games, a whole bunch of stuff. I did God of War 2. That was me. So that was a completely different vibe. And my favorite part of that job was that you got to see stuff so far before it came out. You got to see stuff that ultimately would never come out. You got taken to these international presentations where reps from Japan, America, UK would all get together, and you'd watch these presentations of stuff, you know, that was barely a game, but just so collectively they could all go, "Oh yeah, we think this game's got legs, we think this idea could really go somewhere," or they could, you know, a project could live or die literally on the basis of that presentation. And my fondest memory of that was actually going into the meeting with Fumito Ueda, who made Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, for him to present this new game called Trico. And I was like, "Oh, what's Trico?" This was, bear in mind, this was, I think, 2006, 2007. That was The Last Guardian. So, we saw the trailer for The Last Guardian pretty much exactly as it was in the 2009 E3 presentation, about 2 years prior. So that gives you some idea of quite how long it's been in development. But to be sat in the room with the guy and, you know, see that game so early was just a massive buzz.
Is there any games you thought that didn't come to fruition that you wanted to?
There were some that I would have been interested to see come to fruition. There was one that was actually shown publicly called 8 Days, which was meant to be a sort of buddy cop action movie as game. And there was all this talk of perhaps getting in like people like Paul Walker, the late Paul Walker, to play one of the characters. And the demo they showed at E3 was like impossibly cinematic. It was like, there's no way the game could actually look like this. And I think ultimately that's probably what sank the project. But that was being developed within London studio. And I still haven't seen anything quite like it since. And I think, bearing in mind how successful games like Uncharted and Quantum Break have been recently in terms of, you know, mixing that sort of cinematic aesthetic with gaming, it would be really interesting to see that revisited. Just trying to, you know, a co-op kind of buddy movie, you know, Lethal Weapon as game, I think could be brilliant.
Yeah, that would be good. So, and I understand that you've released your own iOS title as well, in your long career in gaming.
So
Seabeard.
Seabeard. So this was actually a friend of mine, an ex-Sony colleague called Simon Oliver. He runs a company called Hand Circus. And and he'd produced a very, very successful couple of iOS games called Rolando. He did Rolando and Rolando 2. And then he was working on another game, that he wanted me to write. And he said, oh, if we can, I'd really like you to get into write this game. I was like, okay. And then it turned out he got an exclusivity deal with Sony to publish it. And unfortunately, I was at that point a Microsoft employee. so that went out the window. That wasn't happening unless I kind of wrote under a pseudonym,
Yeah.
So that kind of went out the window, and I thought that was sort of the end of it. And then he was like, I'm working on this other game. I've gone back to mobile now because the whole Sony experience wasn't brilliant. Would you like to give it another go? I was like, okay. So he sold me this idea of a sort of Zelda Wind Waker meets Animal Crossing thing. I was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. I want to be on this straight away. And he got me in, and he asked me to kind of consult not just on the story, but on the characters, on the game world, even on gameplay. Like some of my suggestions on how they could implement certain ideas actually made it into the final game. It was a really involved project with a very small team, and I ended up writing in the region of, I can't imagine, 5,000-6,000 lines, maybe way more. I lost count. I was just faced with spreadsheet, tab upon tab of character dialogue and in-game dialogue and, UI text and item text and whatever else, and trying to make head and tails of it all, and kind of just writing. And you get to a point where you're not really looking at the game anymore. You're just looking at text, and you're trying to picture a character in your head and write just dozens of lines for them that are all in character, and and kind of match the game continuity, or don't rely on continuity, so that so they remain kind of they make sense 10 hours into the game as they do like 1 hour into the game, things like that. There's so many weird considerations that I'd never really thought of before that. And I mean, God, it took months of my life, absolutely months of my life to get it all done. And when it came out, I believe it was a fairly big success when it came out, but it kind of fizzled out slowly. And a lot of that, I think, is down to the publisher. They didn't really know what they had in their hands, and they kind of let it die. It was by all accounts a very, very good game, but I think what might have hurt it was a free to play game, but built around this sort of story model. So it was trying to have the sort of freedom of Animal Crossing, but tied to a narrative. And the problem was, I think, when you got to the end of the narrative, to the point where like they were just going to launch more stuff, the user was then sort of at a dead end, and well, what else am I supposed to do? So it didn't maybe have that kind of ongoing freedom that Animal Crossing offers, or even stuff like, Clash of Clans and all those games that are massive. I think with a few tweaks, I think it could have been absolutely huge, but I think it was just a question of like deadlines and budgets and all the usual game stuff that usually thwarts projects. So, but yeah, it was a really educational process to be involved in a game, because obviously I'd produced games before, and I'd looked at game text and maybe modded it a bit for localization, but never to the point where I was actually scripting the entire thing not only that, but a game of sort of RPG type scale with that number of characters and that number of lines of dialogue to write. So it was eye opening and exciting, but by the same, in the same breath, it was also incredibly tedious at times as well. I mean, I've obviously the ultimate desire, I think, is to actually produce a game that is actually of my own making. Not so much on the coding side. Like every time I look, even at something like Game Maker, my head just goes, no, I just can't. I just never really been into that side of things. Like I understand game mechanics and I understand design, but never to the point where I want to really get like, roll my sleeves up and then, get knee deep in code. I'm probably mixing metaphors there, but it's something I've always done. I've written ideas down, and I've got stray bits of note paper or, Google Docs with rundowns of different games. And I really want to make like a nice, simple, arcadey, high score challenge kind of, they're the games I love. I love stuff like Geometry Wars and things like that. And I really want to make a game that has that sort of one more go value, but also that sort of, that kind of depth, those layers, the addictiveness, but it's the depth as well. There's layers where you look at something like Geometry Wars and go, well, it's just point and shoot, isn't it? But then the more you get into it, you realise there's just so much you have to take into account, and strategies and tactics. And I want to make something that has that sort of ostensible simplicity, but that underlying depth and that just drive for people to sort of get high scores. So yeah, watch this space. It could be years, but I've got a few ideas bubbling, that I really want to execute at some point.
Well, you'll have to let us know if you actually do, because, you know, you've got a couple of product testers here straight away for you.
Brilliant. I like voluntary QA is always welcome.
Good stuff. So, shall we talk a bit about Video Game Nation then?
Sure.
So, I mean, we're all big fans of the show.
Oh, thank you.
On Cranky Gamers UK. And what I love about the show personally as a dad is the fact that me and my son, we sit down and we watch it together. And it's it's the only show that we can really both be equally entertained, because, you know, there's a lot of wit and wisdom in the show and there's the stuff that's clearly aimed at the adult audience that will just go straight over kids' heads. Yeah. Which is always good as well, because then you're enjoying it on a level and the child's enjoying it on a level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it was a revamped show that you took over the hosting of. So how did you come up with a format?
So I was approached by Jinx. There's a chap at Jinx called Adam Mason who he took over as producer on the show, and he realised that the format as it was, I think it was Emily Hartridge and Tom Deacon, I think, were presenting it. He just recognised that it was really just doing games a disservice. It was trying to be this sort of broad show, but in completely the wrong way. So they got in touch with me and sort of said, well, what would you do? And so I kind of sat down with them, and it was a collaborative process. We just kind of figured out like what sort of features should this show have? How do we structure it? And it kind of all came from there. And you realise that when you're putting together a half-hour format, it's very easy to fill that up when you look at games. And you see the show, it's like we tend to write and record it maybe a week, if that, before it actually goes live. It was produced incredibly quickly. It was so fast. So the aim was to be as current as possible, but still maintain that kind of high level of quality. So it feels like it might have taken a bit longer to produce than it actually appears. And the team, I've got to tell you, the team on that show is tiny. It's absolutely tiny. So Adam, the producer, is also the cameraman. He's also the guy handling the sound. He's also the guy handling the lighting. We did have interns for a brief spell, but mainly they just did things like fall asleep. If you were lucky. And then there was like a makeup artist, a lady called Jo Harley, who was brilliant fun, just really kept the energy up on set. And then that was it. Like a lot of the time I'd film alone, so it would be like me, Adam and Joe in the basement of like the Loading Bar, which is a gaming pub in Dalston, and that would really be it. And then they go and repeat the process with like Aoife or John, and then for the talking heads, they just invite them all over to another location, usually a place called the Heart of Gaming, which is a little arcade out in the middle of absolutely nowhere in London, and then they just go through maybe like 4 or 5 episodes worth of questions, and then just call them back in a month later and do the next batch. So. And then that was it. We just realised that what gaming shows needed was, one, people presenting who actually gave a shit about games. 2, opinions from other people who were recognised in the industry. Not getting kind of celeb talking heads in because they're recognised, but actually getting talking heads who know what they're talking about. You get these kind of rent-a-gobs on these shows because they're good at talking. But then you think, oh, well, let's get people in like Keith Stewart from The Guardian, or Keza McDonald from Kotaku, or Ellie Gibson from Eurogamer, or formerly of Eurogamer. And I think that just added like so much to the show, and people who were into games are watching it go, oh shit, like I know these people have opinions I recognise. And that would immediately give that show that sort of additional credibility that gaming shows, generally have lacked for such a long time. So it was just that, I just tried to bring the same values I did when I was doing Xbox, which was, as you say, towing a very fine line between producing intelligent content, entertaining content, accessible content, and family-friendly content. And people used to really, some people used to really get angry with me on Inside Xbox, saying, oh, the jokes are juvenile, they're so immature, they're so this and that. I was like, well, that's kind of the point, because we are going out to a big, a wide audience, and sometimes people want to sit there with their kids and watch this show. And as you say, if you read between the lines on some of it, or we make a slightly political or satirical comment, you go, I got that, and the kid's like, I don't care, John Robertson's got funny hair, it's that sort of thing. And the same considerations had to be made for Video Game Nation, because it was going out at 10 in the morning. How do you talk around games like Doom or something at 10 in the morning? So you had to find a way, and it was about finding that line, just achieving that correct line between not doing like Dick and Dom does gaming, but, doing something that was credible. And actually, if you'd watched it at 6 or 7 in the evening, it would have still passed as a credible piece of gaming content.
Yeah. No, I thought the format for the show was excellent. I must admit, when I told my son I was interviewing you this morning, I think he got mixed up with who you were, because he went high def, high five.
Yeah, no, I'm the one who's not funny. That's me.
I said it was him. Oh, brilliant! That
yeah.
All this, that, and the other. He was so excited. You said about the people who come onto the show. I mean, one of the things that I'd noticed that you did, I think in the last series, was you had more comedians coming on, and a lot of shows like the podcasts, for example, like the Infinite Monkey Cage and Star Talk, have comedians as hosts, and it always works really well. And it was just what made you think of bringing comedians into the show?
Again, that's really down to Adam. So he produces another show for Jinx, which I believe is now also over, called Console Yourself, and that is just comedians, gaming comedians, just talking about it, but obviously in a very funny way. And I think it just brings a bit of levity to the show. John Robertson professionally is a comedian, but also produced a lot of YouTube videos about gaming beforehand, and he has that real mix of sort of manic comic energy, but also the sort of knowledge and passion for gaming. And so the same applied. If you just had a bunch of game journalists, most of whom aren't really accustomed to camera, I think overall it would be quite dry. And so I think comedians are just that perfect foil. You get someone who just offers a very insightful opinion on something, and then you just get someone who sort of deflates that with some ridiculous comment immediately after. And obviously that's just that's a comedian stock in trade. That's what they do. And so, it was a bit of a no-brainer, I think, just to get them in. But obviously the difference here was the comedians we got in were all genuine gamers. In one case, Ellie Gibson was actually a games writer before she became a comedian. She's in a stand-up group now called the Scummy Mummies. But the other guys like Inel Tomlinson and Sam Golin, they're comedians first and foremost, but they are genuinely passionate about playing.
I think that came across in the show as well, definitely. It's such a shame that the show's going to because one of my favourite bits personally was I always loved the challenges that you did with each other. So how competitive really were they?
Well, you're talking to the right person. I am a very, very competitive gamer. I took it properly seriously, and the other guys knew that. Like John kind of didn't. He just liked dicking around. Aoife, I think quietly always wanted to win. And Steve McNeil just loved to see me lose because he knew I actually gave a shit. So he absolutely reveled in it. So I'm not a bad loser, but I do hate losing, and it's especially when you're on a big platform like TV. It's all right at home, but suddenly like you're being broadcast to however many 100,000 people, and you're like, shit, this is very public. This is a very public loss and a very public humiliation. And if you watch the most recent Challenges episode, I started very strong, and then something went diabolically wrong on Burnout, and that was just the end of me. That just absolutely ended me, and I was so upset because in practice, I was showing them how to play Burnout Crash. Like, I've played a lot of Burnout Crash. Check this out.
Yeah.
And I got this like 9.5 million first go, 9.5 million Monster Crash. I was like, no more practice required here. Thanks very much. And then I went on to play and then just missed 3 times in a row. And I was like, you couldn't write it.
No.
And then it turned out that John Robertson is an absolute monster at Gang Beasts. And then for that show to then be the last challenge, there was a sort of poetic justice to it, I guess, that John who'd, traditionally been the big loser, in the challenges, just comes out and triumphs right at the end. It was a Hollywood ending, and I'd like to say that we engineered it to be that way, but it was 100% genuine victory because I just absolutely crashed and burned.
I can imagine how embarrassing that might feel, especially if you're going out to hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, it does add another layer to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our listeners, we've got about, just over 2,000 weekly listeners, so we're much smaller than you are, but we normally get somewhere quite good in the iTunes charts as well. So one of these days, it's our ambition, we'll have 100,000 people watching or listening to us.
God, me
and
too.
then we'll probably be scared stiff to start talking. You never know. So, I mean, we're really sad that it's going off challenge. So why was it cancelled when it was so successful and, there was so many listeners to it?
It was just, I guess it was almost coincidental really, but basically Challenge TV, who are owned by Sky, had decided that they were going to veer away from original programming. They did Wrestle Talk TV and Video Game Nation, and that was it. And to be honest, it was surprising that they even did those because they're not even really relevant to what Challenge is as a channel, which is really a game show channel. And so, I was kind of surprised we lasted as long as we did. But they just decided ultimately, this isn't for us anymore. This isn't what Challenge TV is about. And I was like, okay, fine. We kind of knew that. But then there was always that kind of glimmer of hope that Jinx might try and sell us into another channel and keep trying to make it. But then it turns out that Jinx are veering into a new direction as well. And they're kind of slowly winding down all of their existing shows, stuff like The First Hour, like Console Yourself, Planet of the Apps, all that's winding down because they don't fit into their new remit. And unfortunately, Video Game Nation was just in exactly the same boat. We didn't fit into that remit. And so it was just that perfect storm of like, Challenge don't want the show anymore. Jinx aren't making these kind of shows anymore, so there's just no home for it. And so the two together just meant that that the show was over. I believe Jinx kind of still owns the name, and if they're nice, they might give it us if we want to go and look elsewhere. But yeah, that's really what it boils down to. As ever, it's a lot of people have speculated that it was because of viewing figures. It wasn't. It really wasn't. We were just climbing. We were climbing steadily, and you only have to look at our social pages, look at the Twitter responses, look at Facebook to see that we had a large and increasing dedicated audience. There's a lot of people. I've read like the Eurogamer story, and people are like, well, I'd never heard of it. No wonder it died. Internet TV forever. All this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, thanks for your amazing insight, person who's just heard of the show and decided they already know why it failed. But the last reason it got taken off air was actually for viewing figures. But I still think people. One of my other kind of was policy is the word, I guess. One of my sort of policies with gaming TV is to not even try to challenge that school of programming. That I don't think there's something like Video Game Nation online. And my point was like, TV can never be as up to the minute as the internet can. The internet is where people go for news. They will see an announcement on Twitter. Yeah. Within 5 seconds of a trailer going out, hundreds of thousands of people immediately know it exists. There's no point in Video Game Nation or any gaming show doing game previews, doing news stories, running trailers, anything like that. It'll be old news. And so we really focused on, talking about a game in depth while also trying to give a little bit of, insight into the history of the game and our kind of personal feelings on the game. But then everything after that was really just discussion based. And it was more about doing magazine style features in a show, and doing challenges and as you say, that you don't really get elsewhere. So the format was deliberately devised to be TV friendly. It would be internet friendly as well, but as I found, if you try and develop a format like that for the internet, people aren't that interested. People like watching long form content on the internet, but they prefer stuff like Let's Plays, like things that just go on for hours that are just very kind of repetitious to look at. They don't really want to watch this sort of long form intelligent content. There's definitely some. I'm not saying there's none out there, but I still feel like I don't think Video Game Nation, if we just kept the format exactly as it was and stuck it on YouTube, that it would get anywhere near the same sort of following. And I think part of it was that it was sort of appointments of view. People were recording it, but a lot of people liked being there 10 o'clock Saturday morning with their cereal, and a coffee, watching it, and then sharing their opinions on Twitter and stuff immediately after. That's one advantage TV has, is like you have an appointment of view. You can't just kind of casually stroll onto YouTube and go, well, I'm just going to catch up on that episode. There was a sort of an old school sort of community feeling to it.
Yeah. And I think it really worked. So, are you planning on doing anything to bring back gaming TV to our screens?
Yeah, I think I've had some lovely messages from friends and acquaintances of mine, people I just would never expect to have got in touch with me to, first offer their condolences, and then to say, oh, did you know Channel X is currently looking for new content, or so-and-so might be interested, this commissioning editor might want to talk to you. And I've been absolutely blown away by it. So I think in the first instance, what I'm going to do is, rather than go to them and say, hey, can we just have Video Game Nation on your channel? I'm kind of going to go back to the drawing board, because towards the kind of last series of Video Game Nation, my personal feeling was that the format was growing a bit stale. It was very samey, but we weren't getting any more budget from Challenge, and we just weren't able to sort of execute any new ideas. We sort of had to keep rolling with it because we had to keep putting it out weekly, and there was no real chance to kind of take a step back and try and innovate on it at all. And so what I want to do is take a look at all those ideas I had for Video Game Nation, and try and work that into a new show format. Nothing drastically different. I think we should still do a sort of magazine style format show, but just do something more with it, and kind of make it the show that I'd hoped Video Game Nation would ultimately evolve into. I think the funny thing is, like, in, not just gaming though, I think a lot of culture like that is largely underrepresented on mainstream channels. I mean, you look at films, for example, the only serious film show you get on mainstream TV is Film, 2016 now, which is shown at like the graveyard shift. It's showing at like 11:30 or midnight. And it's actually a great discussion about new cinema, but that's all there is. And everything else you get is sort of fluff pieces from junkets, or, shows that are on Sky that are actually paid for by the studio. So here's half an hour about Captain America Civil War that Marvel have paid for. So it's just this gushing half hour about a film. Music, you'll get your Glastonbury coverage and things like that. You've obviously got music television channels, but you very rarely get good sort of analytical music content or music magazine shows anymore. Top of the Pops doesn't even exist anymore, for God's sake. That stuff's fallen by the wayside. For some reason, there's this real underrepresentation of all sort of entertainment media on mainstream TV, and gaming really isn't alone. And so I'm not kind of surprised it's underrepresented, but at the same time, I'm still surprised. There's how can we have so many shows that take the format of, doing up a house or finding antiques? There are so many variants of that across mainstream TV, and they have to do is sacrifice one of those, the budget for one of those, and I reckon you could make a fantastic piece of gaming content.
Do you think that it'll change though? Because, I mean, nowadays, gamers are older. Before, well, it used to be, 8 to 10 year olds. So it used to be who you would think would be a video gamer when I was, first starting to play, and it was, little kids. But now we've grown up and we've continued and brought gaming with us through our lives. Do you think that as the executives who make these decisions about the airing are growing up and getting into these, high-powered positions, that we might see some of this reprisal, and get more gaming TV?
I hope so. I mean, I know of a few people within TV that sort of, within the industry, that do love gaming. None of them, unfortunately, I believe, are commissioning editors, which is the kind of the important role. They're the ones you want to sort of go, hey, we've got a gaming show. Yeah. You see someone like Charlie Brooker. He did Games Wipe as a one-off with a view to turn that into a full show, and couldn't get traction. Like Charlie Brooker couldn't get traction to make a gaming show. There is definitely there's a stigma attached to video gaming still within that industry, and it is. There is change. I mean, Julia Hardy is now full-time at BBC. She's producing radio content, but she's also producing one-off sort of documentaries for the iPlayer as well. And I think that's a really good sign that they've brought someone on board to make dedicated stuff about gaming. It's not like a regular show, but at least it shows they're kind of taking the culture of it seriously. And that's a really good first step. A quote something I said ages ago was like, audiences that grew up with Games Master are fed up that gaming shows didn't grow up with them. And that's,
I love that.
Yeah,
as well.
you know, but everyone's like, bring Games Master back. You're like, well, no, if you look back at Games Master, it was kind of great at the time, but as a format, it was pretty shoddy. And if you just brought it back lock stock, then people would be like, oh, what the fuck is this? But, you know, but it was a good start. It was a great start. It was the same thing. Something you could watch early evening. Kids could watch it. I was certainly watching it. And, you know, you could kind of have a little snigger at Dominic Diamond's, innuendos. It had that kind of working on two levels thing. And I just think that should have been the start of like a gradual evolution of gaming shows. But it never really happened. Nobody really took a proper gamble. We saw lots of stuff like Bits and Thumb Bandits and all these things, always relegated to late night TV, always kind of a standard, but just a bit too rough and ready and kind of trying to be too wacky. And I don't know. There's hope for it. I'm hoping that I'm not going to say I'm going to be the one who does it, but I'm hoping I can make a good stab of at least pitching something that people might be interested in. Give it a go. I mean, just try 6 episodes. Put 6 episodes out, like, I don't know, 8:30 or something. Just see what happens. It might be an absolute disaster. But the problem is like, nobody right now seems to be willing to even take that risk to make 6 episodes. It's like, don't do Kirsty and Phil's whatever, do my house up please show. Just give them a break just for one series. Let them carry on with location. But we don't need the spin-off shows. And just do a gaming show. Just see how that goes. Well, one show that is coming up that I've got a lot of hope for is Go 8-Bit. So Steve McNeil and his comedy partner have been doing a live show for a long time. They've been doing 2, I guess, Go 8-Bit and Wi-Fi Wars. And finally, they successfully pitched the idea of turning that into a panel show for Dave. And so Dara O'Brien's going to host it, and they're the panelists, and Ellie Gibson's a regular panelist, and who else? And then they've got other comedians coming in. They've got some really, really good names coming in, and they're going to be playing through a series of games, and they always put like a really good twist on it. It is like the challenge format from Video Game Nation, like writ large, or like turned into a full-blown gaming show. And I unfortunately didn't get to go and see a recording, but everyone I know who went to see one says it's genuinely funny, it's genuinely entertaining, and it's the perfect mix of like gaming and mainstream. And I think that's great. I think that's a good idea of how gaming can kind of be incorporated into existing formats. You know, people love panel shows. There's so many of them. So I think it's a really good idea to introduce the audience that way. My only concern is that it also sort of celebrates old gaming exclusively. It's not a forward-looking show. I think it's great to have a show like that where people are going to be playing old games and having a laugh and reminiscing and stuff. But by the same token, that also needs to be a show which is actually going, this is an industry that's growing, evolving. The technology is staggering. Let's also celebrate that part of it as well, rather than exclusively dwelling in the past.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to seeing whatever comes next. And as for the show, we're really sad to see it go. We just want to let you know.
Oh, thank you very much. We had a good run.
Yeah, I mean, was it 3 seasons?
I think we did
4.
Some of the seasons rolled directly into each other, so you wouldn't have even known it was a different series. But Challenge were like, just make another series straight away. We're like, okay, another 24 episodes, please. Let me just have a holiday. I think if you include the older version of the show, I think we made something like 105, maybe more, 105, 106 episodes, and I think I've been in close to 80 of those.
That's a lot. I mean, when you actually look at that, that's more episodes than there was of the original Star Trek.
Well, there you go.
There was only 79 of them.
There you go, it's official. We're better than Star Trek.
Oh, that could be fighting talk with us too, you know. Anyway, it's been absolutely great talking to you. Just a couple of quick questions to really finish off. So, what games are you playing at the moment, and on what systems?
Right now, I'm playing so much Overwatch. It's wrong. It's an incredible game. I'm playing it on PlayStation 4 with a lot of friends. It's what the first-person shooter genre has been crying out for such a long time. A proper team-based experience that's accessible to more than sharpshooters. You know, it's a game designed to confuse Call of Duty players, and I love it for that. Brilliant character design, just great team play, amazing balance, and I can't fault it. I absolutely love Overwatch. And then at the other end, not the other end of the spectrum, I guess at the other end of the first-person shooter spectrum, I've also been playing Doom. also on PS4, was really underwhelmed by the multiplayer beta. But the campaign is phenomenal. It's just what the first person shooters been needed for a long time. But it's great. It's like, it just really has those old values of actually having open levels, big open combat arenas, loads of secrets to find out, so it really rewards exploration. And the enemy AI is just brilliant when you've got imps just kind of clambering around the level, you know, trying to get above you, and, you know, they're always trying to hunt you down or get distance from you. And it just makes the fights feel so alive. You know, things like Call of Duty have felt like target ranges for such a long time where you pop up, shoot, die. This is really just about managing the weapons you've got and mixing between them, and every fight just feels like a huge sort of epic struggle, and you find yourself sort of catching your breath once you've cleared an arena. I just think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, both brilliant games. We haven't actually touched Overwatch yet, but it's one of those games I've been keeping an eye on for quite some time, because I absolutely love Blizzard as a games producer. You know, I'm a big fan of StarCraft, or StarCraft 2, I should say. I play that quite a lot. Toz, our main host, he's Mr. Diablo.
Right.
So, you know, Blizzard are one of our favourite game producers. So, you're also jetting off now to E3.
Again.
Which we're all really jealous. Yeah, can you fit us in a suitcase?
I wish, but I'm so vain, I always fill it with clothes, I'm sorry.
Oh, good enough, you know. So, but what we've been doing, or we did on our last show, was we did a little bit of E3 predictions, you know, some safe, some our, you know, wild and wacky ideas about what we might see.
Right.
If indeed you can actually predict anything from E3, because there has been so many leaks, I think it's flooded with stems. So, what are your predictions and hopes for E3?
My hope, this is the far out hope, is that Nintendo have been lying to us the whole time and are actually going to show us an X. That's not going to happen, but there's always the dream. I really would like to see, because I know that Hideo Kojima's new outfit is kind of being funded by Sony. It might be too early to show anything yet, but I really would just like a teaser of what he's working on now. I absolutely loved the Phantom Pain. I thought it was phenomenal. So I really want to know what he kind of does next, because that guy just looks at games in a very, very different way. Even though he tackles very traditional genres, he tackles them in a very different way. And I've heard he's working on an action game, and I want to play a Hideo Kojima action game. On the same note, I would love it if they announced the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance 2, because I thought that was brilliant. I love Platinum. I think Platinum are just the masters of action. I would really like to see him go to town on another Raiden game. I've heard a lot of rumours about Bethesda that I'm very excited about. If they do show Wolfenstein 2, please show Wolfenstein 2. If Prey 2 really is alive, then again, very excited to see that. I was very excited by what I saw of Prey 2 years ago before it was apparently cancelled. So, that'd be great. EA, I'm fingers crossed that they're going to finally reveal the sort of action adventure Star Wars game they've been working on with Amy Hennig, ex Naughty Dog. If they're kind of making, if they're making sort of like Uncharted, Star Wars Uncharted, effectively, like I'm totally down with that. Like, I'm very, very excited for that. And then, God, I don't know. I do think there's a lot that is still being kept under wraps by everyone, despite what we've seen so far. I still think we're going to be surprised by quite a lot of what's coming out, but they're the ones that immediately spring to mind. There's probably stuff I've totally forgotten. Oh, maybe Resident Evil 7. That'd be nice, because, you know, Resi 6, not great. They're making all the right noises about what they do to rectify that. So they've confirmed they're doing the Resi 2 remake. It depends what they do with it. I mean, two great game designers worked on the original Resident Evil 2, Hideki Kamiya, who's at Platinum, and Shinji Mikami, who made the original Resi and then went on to do Resi 4. And the series has never really recovered, because those two guys are just phenomenal. And I just don't know if there's anybody at Capcom right now who can match their talent. So if they do tamper with Resi 2, I'm very interested to see how they think they can kind of improve on it, whether it's just like a major visual overhaul, or whether they kind of make something that's more akin to the recent Resi games in terms of the way it plays.
So what do you think of Bethesda, for example? Because Skyrim HD will be released?
Well, Skyrim, I think will just be a nice polished version of the Xbox One, whereas like with Resi 2 and Final Fantasy 7, they feel like they're going to be complete overhauls, and I'm always way more interested in playing an overhauled version of an old game than I am just replaying the same game again with better textures. So I'm curious. I think the Skyrim thing probably will happen, and I've discussed this on my own podcast actually, and it was really that I think the story behind it now is, even though I'm a bit sick of these remasters, it's a very good, easy way to just generate some extra cash that they can then put into making the genuine sequel. So if they can make a bunch of cash from just releasing a sexed up version of Skyrim, then all the more power to them to put that money into then Elder Scrolls 6.
So I was going to say, and I think the other good thing as well is because so many people before only had one console, and I might have hopped over to the other side. I think it gives people the opportunity to experience, like, for example, the Uncharted collection. Anyone who only ever had a 360, we know a lot of people who had 360s have gone to PS4 because they got a bit annoyed with Microsoft because of everything that happened there. I think it just gives those people that great opportunity to be able to play those classic games, which otherwise I would have missed because they were exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by the same token, it's just a shame that they couldn't have offered true backwards compatibility rather than PlayStation Now.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Yeah, they've got the freedom to do it. And if people are buying it, then more power to them. But I don't really like to see the announcements kind of generate the kind of excitement they do. It's like, oh, we're going to play the same game again. We're going to pay 20 quid for the privilege. It's just sort of. I'm very much about moving forward and moving on and seeing what the current generation of consoles are actually capable of. And you see something like Uncharted 4, you're like, I want to see more games where people are putting that amount of effort into making their games look that beautiful, and play so well, and really, developing genuine next-gen game mechanics. So on the Xbox side, I'm very excited to see more on Recore. And
that looks good.
No, like there's been nothing since the last E3, and they're teasing more with the kind of E3 teasers that have been coming out from Microsoft. And obviously Rare kind of demoed a very interesting looking online pirate game, Sea of Thieves. Yeah, so hopefully more of that as well.
So what about Rockstar, for example, with Red Dead Redemption 2?
But Rockstar are law unto themselves, aren't they? Like they'll just announce things when they want to announce things. So E3 is very rarely where you find out about a new Rockstar game. But yeah, everyone wants Red Dead 2.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm really quite looking forward to seeing the reveal for Mass Effect Andromeda, because I predicted that was going to be Destiny sort of style, and the rumours that I've heard since have kind of like been backing that up. So it'd be interesting to see if they make that a Destiny beta.
Oh, okay, that would be. No, I'd be curious to see if they do go that direction, because I mean, how would playing something in an online space affect the sort of tight storytelling of Mass Effect, and also the diversity of it in terms of your decision making and how that impacts the world at large. So that's going to be a challenge if they do take that online.
It's certainly one of the big things nowadays is affecting the larger universe. I mean, you look at games like Elite Dangerous where trading can affect prices, and doing certain missions can affect different factions who's got control over the universe, and be interested to see if No Man's Sky goes in that kind of direction.
Yeah, the idea of kind of an emerging narrative based on player action rather than just what somebody's written into the game, I think is always very interesting. Obviously EVE Online is a very massive example of that as well. Yeah,
exactly. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. It's been really good fun. I'm sure on behalf of all of our listeners, I'd just love to thank you for spending your time and coming and talking to us.
It's been well, I certainly can, as your listeners probably have just found out. So yeah, I'm very, very sorry if I've been droning on too much. But no, it's been great to talk to you guys. Hopefully it was some of it was interesting.
Oh, it was all interesting, trust me. We always eat up this sort of content.
Brilliant.
Okay, so that's it from us for this very special edition of Cranky Gamers UK. Don't forget you can support us on our Patreon, patreon.com/Cranky Gamers UK. Follow us on our website, crankygamersuk.net, or follow us on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Cranky Gamers UK. And obviously we're all on Twitter at Tozol, at HRJUK, at Steve007, and at Rikki32. Otherwise, that's it, guys, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
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 Inside my room, it's like someone presses buttons and all I see is you. It's like the tender demolition of a matchstick man when the air is unconditioned by a plastic fan. Hot, sexy is what I need. Give it to me, babe, I'll give it back. Give it to me, babe, I'll give it back. Girls, girls, I see you, I cannot describe the view. It's like someone presses buttons and all I see is you. It's like the thunder of ignition when you start to move and dance in your rattlesnake boots and your black leather pants.